All right, guys, thank you for coming to the religion panel. This is Decoding Religion in Today's Media. I'm curious, how many of you have taken the religion reporting class or you're currently in it? Awesome. As the dean would say, that's outstanding. I'm Tracy Simmons. I'm a journalism professor here, teach the religion reporting project and some other courses, and I'm still a practicing religion reporter. We have a really great panel today. I'm proud to say that these are my colleagues and my friends. So closest to me here is Dr. Scott Thumma. He flew here all the way from Hartford, Connecticut, so we're very grateful for that. Dr. Thumma is a professor of sociology of religion at the Hartford Institute of Religion Research, where he is also the director. He's published numerous research reports, website documents, articles, more than I can count when it comes to religious demographics. He's also co-authored 3 books, The Other 80%, Beyond Megachurch Myths, and Gay Religion. He's the principal investigator for 2 Lilly projects, Thriving in Ministry grant, and the 5-year grant to study how the pandemic is impacting houses of worship. So thank you for being here. In the middle, we have Aaron Hedge. Aaron Hedge writes about Christian nationalism or dominionism, as well as environmental issues in and around Spokane. He's led coverage on several important stories out of Spokane, including the fallout from Mayor Nadine Woodward and her appearance at an anti-queer worship concert, the resignation of a gay teacher in Meade, and water contamination on the West Plains. He reports for both FāVS.News, which I'm the editor of, and Range Media through a media partnership. And then on the far end here, we have Cassy Benefield. Cassy is the associate editor of FāVS, and I couldn't do my job if it wasn't for her. She is a wife, a mother, a journalist, and she served for a couple years in the Peace Corps. And she also co-authors our Ask an Evangelical column for FāVS.News. And then lately, she's really been reporting a lot on the refugee resettlement programs in the Spokane area. So thank you guys for being here. They put us in the smallest room. They didn't know we were so popular. So my first question is for Dr. Thumma. Dr. Thumma, your research shows how the religious landscape is changing. So what are the most significant shifts you've observed in how media covers these changes?
I'm not a journalist. I play one on TV. No. But I have been really connected to the religion beat for about 25 years and really have watched a lot of changes happen. Before I answer your question directly, I want to make an important distinction that I think is just crucial. That is, who's producing the coverage. You have, on the one hand, the professional religion beat reporters. They have deep knowledge, long experience, and have done a lot of in-depth and nuanced exploration of religious life. And then, from my perspective, you have everyone else. It's not to say that those folks never produce great stories. They can and they do it, but it's often extremely hit or miss from my perspective as a religion professor. Knowledge of the subject is really key for good stories. The religion beat journalists are much more likely to have a solid understanding of religious dynamics and the background and of history of the religious life, which is really essential to telling good stories. And unfortunately, given the changes in the media, there are fewer of those professional religious journalists compared to 20 years ago. Therefore, a lot of the coverage of the significant changing religious dynamics is by journalists who are untrained and unexperienced in religion. So I think that's a huge thing to say up front. So then, how has the media coverage shifted? First, there's a really positive trend. Given the increased diversity and religious pluralism in the U.S., there's far more coverage of non-white, non-mainline, non-Christian faiths than there was when I was certainly starting out, and really increased in the past few years. But even better, it's often being done by those who share similarities with the people and communities that they're reporting on. This is a great change. Another change I've noticed, given the decline in local papers and much of the quality religion reporting is now being generated by AP and the Religious News Service. These are wire services, and along with a few other major newspapers, they produce basically most of the stories. That result then is that there's very little local or regional coverage of everyday religious life, especially regarding the constructive, beneficial aspects of religious life. So we've lost some connection, I think, to the rootedness of the local religious life. Everything that happens religiously isn't a national trend, and all religion is experienced at a local level, and we're missing that connection, I think, to the grounding. Another trend I've seen made more significant given a decreasingly religious, knowledgeable public, and likely in journalists as well. There's too much reporting that I think ends up being shallow. Here's something that's going on, and here's a couple examples of it, and that's about it. Very little of this coverage really discusses what's going on in a larger context and some of the implications of that. In this day and age, we must assume an ignorant audience, not just report, but also in some ways educate them. And the other trend that has grown most significantly, I think, especially since the Catholic clergy scandals of now a couple decades ago, negative stories sell best. Increasingly with clickbait, headlines that draw people in, one might think that closed churches and interfaith conflict and Christian nationalism and clergy misconduct is rampant. It's not really, but it seems like that because that's mostly the stories that are getting told. There are dramatic changes happening religiously. Knowledge of these changes and creative approaches to reporting them, especially at the local level, I think are really key.
Thank you. Anything you guys want to add? Or? All right. Go ahead, Aaron.
I want to say, like, I really appreciate the idea that, because I focus really heavily on dominionism and Christian nationalism and some of what a lot of people see as like more harmful aspects of what's happening with religion. And I feel that focus is inaccurate. It's not like that stuff needs to be written about, but I really appreciate you saying that we need to be covering like what's happening in the rest of the community, that's the rest of the iceberg, right? Thank you for saying that. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it's a tough balance. I think one of your questions will come to that. But.
Yeah. And if I could just ask you guys to speak up for the people in the very back.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So my next question is for Cassy. As someone helping lead a non-sectarian religion news organization, what challenges do you face in ensuring accurate and balanced coverage of faith communities?
So as I was thinking about this question, one of the first things that popped into my head was getting quotes from the shyer communities that are more suspicious of the media. And that's very, very difficult. In particular, we have two communities that are very difficult to talk with. The Catholic Diocese of Spokane and evangelicals that lean conservative, and what we would, forgive me for doing this, but identify as the Make America Great kind of evangelicals. It's very hard to prove to them that your media organization is willing to share their perspective cleanly, with, in an unbiased manner. That's from their perspective, they think media in general is negative toward them, and a large part is because what Dr. Thumma was saying. It just is. They get that. That's the media coverage they get, and so and they also tend to be insular communities, and they have insular media. That their communities are very insular. And so they don't care to break out of that. And so they don't care about your media organization. And one of the things that I also thought of was our latest reader poll, which was really good, shows that our readership leans heavily mainline Christian. And we really want all faith and non-faith communities engaged in our work. And so I think we make an effort to include those voices. We look for columnists with those voices. We try to make sure we have articles that focus on those voices. We're doing a series on atheists, the Atheist State of the States report, and kind of following how that fits in with the Pacific Northwest, and that's Idaho and Washington. So you've got two different kind of groups of people, two different kind of states, and it's an ongoing work in progress. And so the best way, I think, is relationship, and just staying abreast of the unique work that people are doing in the community, and maybe even think of go to community events that have nothing to do with nationalism, maybe an Easter egg hunt, and write a story about that, and just really work on relationships. And also we have a community calendar, and we tag them on Facebook. See, we like you. So anyway, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So that's what I have for that one.
Anything that you guys want to add?
You can't emphasize enough the suspicion of media, and I would extend that to suspicion of the academy as well. We can't get people to complete our surveys in certain communities, and that has only gotten significantly worse. It's a real challenge.
So Aaron, you cover the influence of religion and politics quite a bit. So how do you approach explaining complex theological concepts to a general audience?
I think so. I grew up as a Christian. I was raised in a Christian household. It was much more. It was very different from the communities that I cover right now. It was more of rather than a dominionist community that wants to go out beyond the four walls of the church and kind of take over and control society. I grew up in kind of a separatist type of Christianity, and there was a lot of overlap to the values of both communities. But I do remember, and I'm going to talk about dominionism because I think that's that's kind of the umbrella term for all of the theological concepts that I engage with. When I was growing up, I remember I went hiking with my kid sister, and we came back, and she had a tick that had buried itself in the back of her neck, and my mom, she was trying to pull it out, and she was a very pious Christian woman, just trying to get this parasite out of my sister's neck, and she exercised her dominion over this tick. She prayed to God and said, acknowledged that God in Genesis had given humans dominion over, I think it's Genesis 1:26, God gave humans dominion over the rest of the natural world. And I went into my first engagements with dominionism. Basically, what that means is we can, as humans, we can command them what to do, and they'll do it because God gave us dominion, and we have to claim it, but we can exercise it if we're faithful to God. I'm not a Christian anymore. The kind of dominionism that I encounter now is very different from that. And it's a slight twist of the term to basically say, by extension of humans having dominion over the natural world, Christians also have dominion over other human beings, which is a very controversial thing in Christian circles. I don't believe that most people engage with that. It took me a really long time watching the sermons of a local pastor. His name is Matt Shea. He runs a pretty far right church out of Spokane. He's a former state legislator. He got in trouble and had to leave that profession. But he's the one who kind of like really made that ring for me, because he did a series of sermons on dominion and how humans have to claim dominion, and by extension Christians have to claim dominion over the rest of human society. The question for how to do that, I think it's just really careful, deep listening, consulting a lot of people. It took me a long time to really understand that. A lot of people had to tell me that in so many words before I really felt like I got it. And I think it's just like, this might not be very satisfying, but yeah, it's just the hard shoe leather reporting where you go out and you talk to people, and if you don't feel like you're getting it, you talk to them until you get it. And once you feel like you get it and you can say it back to them and they agree with you, then that's when I think you can explain it to other people. So when I'm writing, one of the things that keeps me between the lines, I think, is I keep it in the back of my head, like, is this thing that I'm writing down, would the people I'm trying to explain agree with me? Would they write me an angry email and say, you got it wrong? And if I can confidently say to myself that they wouldn't do that and they would agree with me, then I feel pretty comfortable. And that's worked for me so far. I don't know if it's going to continue working, but it's been a pretty good mode for me to operate in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So I have a question for all three of you. Everyone who covers religion comes with their own experience with religion. So how can reporters navigate covering multiple faith traditions while maintaining journalistic objectivity? So whoever wants to go first. I'm just going to listen.
I'll go real quick. So I have a pretty strong faith, and it has been restructuring since being involved in FāVS. I don't say deconstructing, I say restructuring. So I think if you're coming at it with a faith, but you really love religion and you love talking about it, I think I would say, be open. And I think the other thing is be curious. I love that Tracy wrote an editorial on a story we did on a Trump car parade when now President Trump won the election. They were just ecstatic. And this was like one of 20 car parades that they had done over the years, And so it was like a cultural moment. This is a culture. This is a people that have a distinct culture, and oftentimes religion is involved in culture. And so it was, you just kind of go into it with that kind of understanding, and you're able to put your beliefs and your ideas and your own understanding on the shelf and enjoy, if you will, the people before you. Enjoy the human before you. Listen to them, understand them, let them speak, let them tell you why they feel the way they do, why they believe the way they do, and those things. What I've learned in my reporting, how can we do it, is be willing to change. I can't tell you how much this job or this work that I'm doing has enriched me on so many levels, even making my faith even more beautiful. And it has also taught me how to navigate my others. It's just an incredible journey. So I think if this is something people want to do, I think you have to push through that uncomfort, put it on the shelf, and just see people as people and let them share their faith with you and their traditions, and find the story there, and report the story and go, make friends.
I was at a program at the Airway Heights Correctional Facility last night, and it's a series of events that they do for incarcerated people, and it's not just for Black folks, but it's called the African American Literature Program, and they had a guest speaker, a professor of Africana Studies from EWU who came in, Christian man, and he said most of the trauma that we are experiencing as a society stems from the difference between hearing and listening, and this builds on what Cassy is saying. I think people define the difference between hearing and listening as if you're hearing something, you're like receiving information, but if you're listening, you're putting down your preconceptions and being willing to understand something from somebody else's perspective without imposing your own values or moral systems onto it. I don't really believe in objectivity. I'm a human being. I've never been objective. I pick the stories that I think are important for people to read, and that's inherently a subjective thing that I do. But I do think that I can be fair, and to be fair, I need to listen deeply and be able to, because I have a lot of opinions about the things that I write about, very strong opinions, and I voice them in my private life. But I am learning, and it's a slow process, and it's a difficult process, and I'm not always perfect about it. But I am learning how to put down my preconceptions before I ask somebody a question, and really just put lower the guardrails and let them tell me how they feel about things. And I think that's the best way I know how to do it. I don't cover a lot of different faith traditions, but I do cover one that I often disagree with. And I've learned a lot from the folks that I cover by being willing to put down my preconceptions about them.
And Scott, you're not a journalist, but you are a religion communicator. So what about
Well, and even more so in social science, you debate this all the time, objectivity. And I would say, like Aaron just did, I don't think there's any such thing as this ideal objectivity that we can reach, right? I'm an old, cisgendered, educated, well-off white guy, and from a fundamentalist background, and I bring that with me no matter where I go. Those traits really color all my perceptions, my engagements, my observations, the theories that I bring to what I've seen, and they empower that too. I mean, it's not just a negative. It really drives what I look at and the books I've done and all of that kind of thing. But at the same time, as both of you have said, I think there are ways, that we have to keep that in check. We have to acknowledge that. And there are a bunch of tools I teach my students, I use. I constantly ask myself, what am I not seeing here because of the lenses that I have? What emotions are being stirred up in me in this event? And that's an indication of possibly where some of my bias lie. I think acknowledging and confronting my own biases and being honest with myself, and here I would want to say Professor Simmons' articles about her own religious upbringing and the effects that have had on her are truly outstanding in that regard and pretty unique. You don't usually read that of reporters or for that matter, academic researchers. So I think acknowledging that, gaining more knowledge of the subject, learn who they are, establish more rapport and trust, and that means, as Aaron just said too, don't address challenging subjects with a kind of one-off reporting event, right? Go back and learn what the community's about, and see them in the Easter egg hunt, and see them at good times and bad times and sort of off-stage times. That begins to give you a different perception of these folks. I grew up fundamentalist. My family are all fundamentalists. They all went to Jerry Falwell's Liberty University. I meet with them every Christmas and Easter, and we are in two different worlds. But I recognize their world. I appreciate it. It's not my world. And I think also finally then, once you do produce pieces, ask for critique and correction by others who aren't like you. And sometimes that means going back to the community and say, well, what do you think of this? When we're doing ethnographic work with a community, the greatest, I think, in some ways, accolade is when a community picks up what you've read and says, you captured us, right? This is us. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes they get angry and say, you missed who we are. But that's an important check, I think, as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I promise I'm going to leave time for questions, but I do want to ask an important one. I think we all agree we live in an era of increasing polarization. So how can media outlets effectively cover religious extremism without amplifying those voices or alienating mainstream believers within those traditions? And this is for whoever wants to tackle that.
I think telling, like, being clear in your writing about, the harms that exist within, or at least the communities that I cover, is very important. Say, like, you can say, like, this research shows that this thing has this effect. But the people who participate in these communities, like, they wouldn't come to these communities. Like, people would not go to Matt Shea's church if they didn't see something good in it. And I think a lot of the folks that I've talked to that attend his church, they see a community that will, if they toe the line, they'll show up for them. They'll mow their lawn. If they're having a health crisis, they'll drive them to the hospital. Somebody's struggling paying the rent, like, they'll pool some money and get it together for them. They'll show up. And a lot of folks that come to that community come to it out of a place of trauma and needing something like that in their life. And so those stories are important to tell too. Just being clear that these people, and there are bad people in that church, people who do harmful things to other people, but that's not most of the congregation. Most of the congregation is people who they're human beings. They struggle with life. Many of them are very good people and want good things for their fellow human beings. And I think being willing to say that about those communities is really important. It's difficult to strike the balance between that and, like, you don't want to say that somebody who, may have, like, tagged a bathroom with a swastika or something is a human being. Like, you don't want to elevate that voice, but so you have to be careful about parsing who people are. But and I think a lot of that just goes back to what I said earlier about just working hard, getting to know the community. Dr. Thumma said, go back. I think that's really important. Go back and see what they think. So that's what I got.
It's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is really tough. It's something I think about almost constantly. As somebody who not only sort of researches religious life, but also attempts to try to support thriving communities and to make religious life better in the U.S., I'm continually troubled. Any coverage of extremism amplifies the cause of that group and simultaneously alienates other believers outside the community. These stories, though, have to be told. You can't just avoid when abuse is happening or when there's damage being done. But those stories damage both the brand of religious life and also the believers that want to cling to that for comfort and for meaning. I mean, it's a really challenging thing. As one who, in my dissertation on a megachurch in Atlanta, uncovered sexual misconduct in the hundreds of people, I had to write about that, but also sort of tell the story of how that came about. So, I mean, I think one of the ways to try to do it is to balance the extremism and the abuse within a larger perspective. Understand the context that it's in. So sometimes the coverage of extremism, while it amplifies it, it often is just a few people. It's just a small group, and I think sometimes pointing that out while also telling the story kind of says, well, but there is this larger community. The other thing that I think really helps, and Aaron hinted at some of this too, is tell stories on the other side of extremism. Balance out your reporting with much more positive perspectives, kind of radical acts of generosity and kindness and compassion. You know, if we begin to see some of those acts of beneficial religious extremism as important to tell as the others, you realize that religion isn't all about extremism and abuse and that kind of thing. It kind of balances a bit more.
I just, as he was talking, I wanted to add, I have a friend, as a professor at Gonzaga, Dr. Joan Braun. She is adamant that when you're telling stories on extremism, that you do not tell the story of the extremist who has turned the corner. You should always base it on the victim. So the story should always focus on the victim overcoming whatever. Something like that. I'm probably murdering how she would say it, but I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that, and that might be a way of showing the extremism without amplifying it. I don't know, but it is a hard topic. That is a hard topic.
So I have more questions in my notes, but I know we have a room full of budding journalists. So if anybody wants to ask a question, yeah.
I'm trying to think of how to adequately word this. So zooming out on a more national lens, for certain groups and communities who've maybe never really interacted with people of different faiths or of, maybe no faith at all, how do you think mass media can make religious reporting a little bit more accessible so that we're able to sort of see different communities, especially for those people who might not have the opportunity to pick up their local paper and see a story about another congregation or completely different faith or something like that?
Well, I think humanizing the people within the faith is very important. And one of the ways you can do that is through studies. It reminds me of a study that we reported on by CARE. I don't know what it stands for, but it's Council of American Islam Relations, something like that. Anyway, so they did a report and they showed how Muslims in Washington State feel about being, how they feel others perceive them, and also how much they've incurred.
Like racism.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just the bad things, and it was astonishing for the amount that they have felt in such a progressive state. And so reporting on stuff like that where you're humanizing their experience. And we also just localized the Holy Festival in Spokane, and just showing the joy that Hindus have of their faith and expressing that through the reporting. Just expressing their faith and just teaching your community. I think it starts at the local level. That's what I would say too.
There's also, I think humanizing them is like crucial. There's a guy. He's a longtime extremism reporter named Frederick Clarkson. You might be familiar. He's a researcher with Political Research Associates, and he does great stuff. But one of the things he does is he'll take a term, and he'll research the term, and he'll break this term down and just like basically give like a researcher's dictionary definition of this term in like 300 words, which is a really simple way of like breaking down information. So that way, like, you know, if people are encountering this term out there, like the New Apostolic Reformation or something like that, what is that? Like, that's a really complicated thing to think about. He just like distills it down, which is just basic journalism. But I think that's really helpful. There's also there's a radio show called, or it's a podcast called Straight White American Jesus, and it's run by Bradley Onishi and I can't remember the name of the other guy, Dan Miller, and they're both academics. And on their Wednesday show, Dan Miller he spends a half an hour breaking down a term. So like, or like an image. He took a card that was like given out at churches that said, "Here's what you can expect at our church," and one of the things that you can expect at the church is smiling wives. Not happy wives, smiling wives. And he just like takes that terminology and he says, okay, well, here's what's underneath this. So explanatory journalism is really important, I think.
That's good. Do you want to jump in?
No, I don't have anything good to say. I'm sorry about that.
I'm curious how the election and the election results impacted your reporting and how it impacted the tone of the churches that you cover, or if that tone was something that you expected with the election results, if that makes sense. Like some people cover these conservative churches, so you know that a large majority of people would be happy, but do you cover that other side of the people who attend these conservative churches who aren't maybe as happy or who are more middle-leaning?
I would love to.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I would love to. I would say she's asking if the results of the election, how the results of the election changed or altered your reporting. And I think the nut was if the people that maybe weren't so happy with the way the results went are in a conservative church, you know, that was happy, were you able to talk to them? And the quick answer is no. I don't know.
One of the things our data showed, we've been collecting data on congregations since 2020, but post-pandemic, conflict in congregations went way down. And part of that was because we think that people have sorted out. And so now the congregations are much more homogenous. And because of that, it puts far more pressure on the folks who are somewhat deviant in that congregation to not explain and talk about what they're feeling and thinking. But a lot of them have been driven out and gone to congregations that match more closely to their ideas.
Yes, I am one of those.
Lucy, go ahead.
Oh, not a question, but just adding on to that. Sorry, that sounds kind of. But I covered a kind of new form of church in Spokane, and they kind of encourage healthy political discourse. And so it's also really interesting to see that because it was an idea that originally started over COVID, and it's now kind of been brought to Spokane here. It's just really interesting, and how I guess the creators spoke about how getting people to talk to each other about politics who disagree is really important for religion, and like I guess bring community together. So that's just something. Great.
I'll get you next.
I have a question that kind of stems from like the smiling wives thing, but as journalists, we all obviously are like individuals. We all have certain things with our identity, and so when, I guess, reporting on certain religions or individuals within certain religious groups that feel, you know, a type of way about like intrinsic things that you can't change, you know, like gender, race, sexual orientation, those things, how do you, I guess, what's the most effective way to approach reporting and trying to tell those people's stories from an objective way, while being, you know, maybe an individual that they oppose, if that makes sense? Like, how do you navigate putting aside those personal things that I wouldn't even necessarily consider like biases, because they're not things that you can, you know, change about your identity, and how do you kind of navigate that without putting those, you know, aspects of your identity into your reporting, if that makes sense?
It's about using what you have to establish rapport.
Okay.
So you can look at me and see that I'm a tall white dude in my 40s. I'm straight, cisgender. I don't have anything that would freak the communities out that I cover, and that's an asset. And maybe it's gross, but it's something that you can use to your advantage. And I know our editor, Luke Baumgarten, he tells, so our other reporter, Aaron Sellers, is non-binary, presents queer, would not be comfortable going into the environments that I go into. And maybe people who present queer would be comfortable with it, but I know that Aaron is not. So I'm just speaking from my own like newsroom experience. And I would think that the churches that I go into probably wouldn't receive Aaron very well. And I know that we've done reporting projects together where they found the story and I went and did the confrontation interviews. And so I think it's about using your, like, if you can work in a team environment, like just using those qualities about yourself in the most productive way that you can. Those are gross realities, but like, yeah, that's definitely something you need to consider.
We have try to get to 2 more questions in the very back, and then over here.
I'll stand so you guys can see me. So it seems like we're kind of, if talking about polarization, it seems like we're kind of in an era, for some people in the United States, that we're kind of on like a second wave revivalist, kind of similar to like the teachings of Billy Graham and like the Reagan era back in the 80s. But I think the main difference that I've seen is that we have social media now. It's not just tele-evangelism, it's not just the newspaper. So how do you guys think that's going to impact how we cover that and how we consume that as young people?
That's a good question.
The like dominionism wouldn't be dominionism without social media right now. I don't think it would be. I mean, it would still be a strong force, I think, but it wouldn't have the legs that it has. The folks in that world put out information constantly, and there's 2 ways to look at it. Like it's part of it is like a flood the zone strategy. There's so much that it's really difficult to parse through all of it, and that can make the job more difficult. But there's also, it's really accessible, and I'm able to make a lot of connections using social media that I wouldn't otherwise be able to see if it were happening in a different realm. It's useful. It can be a little much. I really like it for the reporting aspect of it.
Thank you. Yeah, you've been very patient.
So
we've been talking a lot about like local level, right? But then when I think we pull back and look at the national level, we have something like FāVS.News, where it's the largest, news platform that we're seeing, and it's the most viewed. So when something like Fox Entertainment News specifically, not the branches, are platforming people like Jesse Waters, for example, who are very deliberate about their their nationalistic view of what the country should have in terms of religion. How would you say we could affect those spaces? Because when you have the local level that just view, that news, you're not breaking into that bubble, so there's not going to be any change there, or at least that's my perception. So how would we end up breaking into that, and how would we end up making change in those areas to open those bubbles up to more?
I don't know if that's, everything I've ever heard about that personally is all about relationship and staying on the common ground. And I think journalists, if there was anything to do, would to be focusing on telling stories about relationships, about people. There's a documentary that said something about her father, how Fox News ruined her father, and so that's a face-to-face thing. So as a journalist, you could tell those stories. I don't think you can change anybody's mind, but I'm kind of cynical about that. So.
Yeah, the algorithms, going back to the social media and stuff, they're all satanic. I mean, because Fox too kind of creates a sort of echo chamber that doesn't allow. And I agree absolutely. It's about relationships and such. There are some other efforts. AP and the Religion News Service have a collaboration now and they're
NPR.
writing. Oh, and NPR. That's right. I forgot about that. They're creating some really fine pieces and starting to hear. But who's going to hear that? People who,
Like NPR.
Yeah, like NPR, exactly. I'm enjoying them. Yeah, so it really is a difficult thing, which is part of the reason why I think local stories and telling those kind of positive aspects. The other thing that we haven't really talked much about is if you look at national polling, Pew and others, younger generations primarily think of religion as a negative. And so then to try to sell people who are below my age on the good of religion, you're going to have to tell stories that highlight some of the positive, meaningful nature of religious life. But yeah, it's hard.
So we only have 2 minutes left, and I know I saw more hands up, so I'm going to encourage you guys to come talk to our panelists afterwards. I know they would be happy to answer questions. So please join me in thanking our panel. And thank you guys for coming. Enjoy the conference.